Let's talk about the notion of children being an investment for parents during their old age from two perspectives. The first one is from the West, the people in the West. We're talking about first world countries. And we are going to juxtapose that to third world countries, to be specific, African countries, the African culture. It doesn't necessarily apply to all of us, but in most African cultures, which is quite similar to the Asian cultures, the Hindus, the Arabs, the Chinese, there's also that notion of children are sort of like security for their parents during old age. So in the West, actually, let me start by saying this. I have had conversations with people, with Kenyans who live abroad, live in the West. And one of the culture shocks that they had was that in the West, elderly parents save money for their own retirement, for their own pension. And there's that theme of independence. They don't want to rely on their children in terms of care, especially financially. So whatever they do, they save up money for their own retirement. Of course, we have retirement security plans here in Kenya, but I'm talking about the thought of independence. For them, they don't want to be a burden to their children. It's also the same thing that I've seen in some of the videos that are usually posted on social media, especially on TikTok, where you see elderly homes, senior homes, and we have this group of elderly people that are creating videos, social media videos. They're very active on the platform. Somebody goes ahead and leaves a comment that they can't take their parents to such homes. They would rather stay with their parents during old age than go and live in senior institutions. And then somebody goes ahead and leaves a comment that no, an elderly person or a senior person goes ahead and says, I don't want to be a burden to my children. I'd rather not live with them during my old age. I'd rather go to a nursing home where I can be taken care of and my children can come and visit me so that they also can live their lives. They can enjoy their lives with their children the same way they enjoyed their lives during their youth with their children. Somebody from my culture, just like me, because I also grew up knowing that children are investments to their parents, will go ahead and leave a comment that no, in our culture, so giving the context of the African culture, or in the Asian culture, we live with our parents through old age. So you can see that there are two opposing sides on how to view children in terms of old age. So are they really a security? Let me give this context from the African culture. Even in our textbooks, the CRE that I did, it was a subject. It was talking about how, or the reason why our grandparents had 13 children, had 16 children, had 10 children, had 8 children, is one, that was one of the reasons, so that they can have a security during their old age. Because for our grandparents, not all children survived to puberty. If you have more children, you're going to have some who are going to be alive by the time you're old, and they can take care of you. That was one of the reasons. The other reason was in terms of wealth. The more children you have, the more wealthier you are. Now, with regard to that, when you even look at how land was distributed, because land was inherited. So our grandparents would buy plots of land, and for them, they're buying these plots of land so that they can distribute it to their children. Now, let's put that into perspective today. Today, if I was to buy a plot of land, I would think about building that land, selling that land, or having cash flow from that land other than living in that land. So you can think about now our grandparents who had parcels and parcels of land. For them, they were not thinking of it from the economic perspective of, I want to have a huge piece of land so that I can work on it, make money, and perhaps I can use this money to take care of me during old age because I'm going to have cash flow. That is not what they were thinking of. They were thinking of, okay, I'm going to buy a huge parcel of land, then I'm going to distribute it to my male children. Then the land is going to be inherited to my great-grandchildren. So you can see the succession of wealth. As long as they have that, I am well taken care of, because in this land, they're going to take care of me. When you even look at the African setup, I bet if you're an African, you've seen this. If your grandfather had land, when you look at, let's say, your uncles or your dads, or even you as somebody who inherited land, you'll notice that the land that was inherited, you are building a house next to your grandparents. So you can imagine this is your grandparents' parcel of land, this is their house, and they are distributing land to their other children. So they're going to live on a communal basis. It's a community because your children are going to surround your homestead. Now, back to the people in the West. In the West, it's more of independence. It's more of cash flow. I want to work now, save money for my pension now, have investments now so that I can have a source of income during my old age. I don't have to think about my children sending me money. But here in Africa, it's the opposite, or in our culture, it's the opposite. So that can be a culture shock for both cultures, where someone will be saying, it's so selfish of you to think about yourself such that you're going to have children so that they can take care of you. It's viewed as selfish. But on the other side, when you flip the coin, it's a good thing because your parents have taken the time and the energy to take care of you, raise you to be the man that you are, to be the lady that you are. The only contribution that you can do is take care of them during old age. When they get sick, chip in. Go visit them during the holidays. In fact, even live with them. Now, there's also another story where somebody says, I don't think I should say this, but they say that it's usually the it's usually the daughters-in-law who take care of the grandparents. I don't want to get into that. This is our finance channel. So from those two perspectives, I can say that even the systems that we have, the economic systems that we have, they are quite different. Someone was telling me that in the West, let me talk about European countries, they have very good packages for elderly people and even their pension packages. As long as you've worked, you are entitled to pension during your old age so that you don't have to work. So there are systems in place. You have to file papers. You don't have to worry about your old age because the government is going to cater for you. But here in Africa, we don't have developed systems. Yes, we have pension funds, which is something that the current generation has access to and our parents had access to. But when you go back to our great grandparents, when you even go back to our grandparents, social security wasn't a big thing since most of the African countries were not economically independent, or we didn't have such economic structures. So you can see that our grandparents were taught when they were young that they were supposed to take care of their grandchildren. They didn't have these pension systems, whereas in the West, as early as the 1980s, you can see that their economies were developed. So anyway, the point is, the whole economy doesn't even support the pension systems. At least right now, we're starting to have an enlightened generation here in Africa, to be specific here in Kenya, because I'm a Kenyan. We're now starting to see private pension schemes. I'm even having people reach out to me so that they can, they're thinking about their retirement and they're looking for how can I retire while having cash flow so that I don't have to be a burden to my children. So we're starting to see that reform where the elderly, that is the current generation, they're not elderly, but when they get older, they don't want to be a burden to their children. They're looking for schemes, they're buying bonds, they're looking for pension schemes so that they can have that source of income that is going to sustain them. They don't have to be a burden to their children. This time, I think it was in 2023, there were protests in France because they had increased the retirement age from, I think, 62 years to 64 years, yes. And it's not just in France. When you look at Kenya, the retirement age used to be 55 years, but now it's 60 years. We're starting to see these reforms. Now, let me just give you some context on how this affects the economy and how this can affect you. It's because when you look at the West, countries in the West, there's usually this notion of a declining birth rate. So if we have more elderly people during their old age, during their retirement age, who are supposed to be taken care of, they need the money. But if we have a younger population that is not giving birth and the birth rates are declining, where is the government going to get money from the people who should be the working class to take care of the elderly people? So it's more of an economic issue for the government in terms of sustaining pensions for the older generation. So the point is, we have institutions, well-structured institutions in the West that look after the elderly, such that they would even encourage reforms to increase the birth rate, the declining birth rates in these countries. You can see that the burden is not more on the family unit, on the parents of these older retirees or older retiring people, but the burden is on the government. But for us here in Africa, the burden is on the family unit. If your grandmother is sick, if your mother is sick and she's retiring, it's not the work of the government to look into the health system. You have to have money. If you come from a struggling background, you have to sell a plot of land. If there are 5 children, they have to contribute money towards the health of your parents. So you can see how these cultures are different. My question to you is this: what's your perspective? Should parents live with their children and it should not be viewed as a burden per se? And is it really a burden? Because I know it can be an economic burden for people who come from struggling backgrounds, and we don't have institutions like in the West that can take care of the elderly people. Do you feel like we are neglecting the senior citizens? Are you of the sentiment that taking your elderly parents to a senior's home is cruel? Just before I close, I remembered a story of, it was a comment from one of the social media platforms where someone who works in a nursing home, so she's a younger nurse who takes care of the elderly, she works there. She was talking about how we neglect parents in these elderly homes. You take your parent to an elderly home, they're well taken care of. You don't even take the time to go visit them, even once a year. You just go leave them there and you live your life and you forget about them. So is taking parents in an elderly home a cruel act? Or should we live with our parents, take care of them until the end of time? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.